All right. Hi. How are you? Uh, I'm Zach. This is Design Technique, and I'll be talking about signage and wayfinding in the desert. We're based out of Dubai. We work in the GCC, the Levant, and in general, the way that we do things um, compromises of understanding the environments that we develop for, and that plays a huge part of my presentation today. In Dubai or in the region, we really build massive environments because we have a blank canvas, and that blank canvas means that we really get to do things in a different way, do things at a massive scale, do things that are quite abnormal to the rest of the world. And the first thing I want to address is the addressing system that we have or the lack of. So this is how I point people to where I live or a similar way. You start by saying, do you know the street called Nazat al-Hus? That's in Beirut where I grew up. And off Talat Druz, it's called the Independent Street, the one you take going from Vardan to Ashrafi. That's an example from copied from somebody who I really value as a signage and wayfinder. And then you continue the address by telling people how to get there. So I want you to get to my place. And this is, you have to go downhill, keep on going straight until you pass the restaurant that formerly was Al Farouj. You're going to see the big yellow sign. Once you see that big yellow sign, on your right, you'll see a supermarket called Fakani of 150 meters uphill. Then you have to see the vegetable shop down the corner, take that right, keep going down straight. Then when you drive 30 meters down that road, you basically end up seeing an NGO sign. Opposite that NGO sign is where I live. Not the first, not the second, the third grey building on the fifth floor, on the door on the right. So I grew up without signage systems. And when you grow up without a signage system, you build a knack for a signage system. And you start to understand how people navigate environments, and you want to really uh, make sure people get where they want to go. You don't want people to get lost. You don't want to end up in the street collecting people when you invite them over to your house. So the whole system really started from the lack of systems. And then once you start to analyze these environments and understand how people move, it is all about the person at the end of the day. It's all user centric. Some people need information in different ways. Some people can focus on a lot of information. So you have to really understand the type of people you're catering for. So I want to start with basically the structure that I'm going to take you through today. I want to describe the city we live in first, show you the map that me and you developed together for the city of Dubai, and how transport really works and where it ends. And then when transport ends, then your own transportation methods start. While using cabs or using cars, that is kind of the center of how what Dubai revolves around. You really require a vehicle. It's 60 degrees Celsius in the summer. You have 6 months where you can't even walk 5 minutes. So getting out of a tram station or a metro station and going where you want to go is impossible. You must have a car. Once you really start to understand how the desert is formulated and how transportation systems work, we first address the anxiety of transport. We don't understand maps because we have bad maps, and these are very good examples of bad maps. These are the maps that exist today, and these are the maps that people are using. These are the maps that are in bus stops. And once you see these types of maps and you look at them, you genuinely don't want to read them. You don't want to discover them. You don't want to go into the details. So when Jung showed me the maps that he's making, I was impressed. And that made me feel that I can read a map. I can understand how maps function and how maps flow. So we started by understanding the city. Our maps are based on something that is not geographical. So I look at the map on Google Maps, and then I look at the map that is in a bus stop or a tram station or a metro station, and it doesn't make sense. It is not the map that I was expecting to see. It is not on the same geographic format. So we took the map, we laid it out correctly, we started to address all the issues that we had with the previous maps and simplifying the maps to a limit, adding all the things that we know that are in the city so we can have reference points that are easy for us to follow. Once we did that exercise, we started to really understand how transport really works and how where it can get you to, what is its limits. And since Dubai is a new city, The metro is built really simply. So it's a straight line going through all the stops. If you lose your way, you just end up at the next station and then you get out, you go back. It is quite simple. Once we really defined the language of this map and we could really understand how the hierarchy works, you get to see that it really stops here. You can't venture further down into the city without a car. So transport stops and wayfinding must guide you through. And that's why we have so many different projects that I will take you through today, starting with how you live in the city, how you actually get home, how you get to work, where do you go out, and where do you venture to, whether it was hot or nice. Nice weather is about 4 months in the year, and then you have the rest of the year, which is intolerable. So you cannot be outside. So we build massive environments indoor that require you to navigate through. And as you navigate through, maps become complicated because, I mean, as Naver was saying earlier on, it gets really confusing once you're indoor. It is not as easy to navigate people using maps within built environments, especially when you have many layers and massive, massive malls or massive hospitals or massive structures. So you really require signage and wayfinding. You require tools to move you around that are clear and simple. And that's where desert living comes in. We start by showing you types of examples of architecture developments that are built from scratch that don't exist. And I come in to build a signage and wayfinding system for these structures that don't exist. So it is difficult to simulate these environments and take you through as a user without showing you the environment first. So what we try to do is take what architects give us, what architects make available, like SketchUp models or BIM models, and we try to really infuse signage and wayfinding within those, show you the correct messages, the correct sizes, the correct dimensions. So you navigate through the environment before ever seeing the environment that you will build. And when you have complex environments that are 330,000 square meters large, and you have multiple functions like offices and residences and retail, you really require a map to discover the environment and then signage and wayfinding to guide you through to where you want to go. So we have to be graphic designers. We have to be interior designers. We have to be architects. We have to be mappers. We have to understand people's anxieties and people's perception of environments. How do I take you through a certain environment? By highlighting decision points, by highlighting where you can go and what kind of tools you might need going through those types of environments. And then you have to add a creative layer to those environments. You have to make sure that people really understand them really well, but also embed them in their minds by creating a mental model of the environment that they're in. Once you're looking at it from top view down on a plan, it is completely different than when you're navigating through it and going through it yourself, where everything is larger, way larger than what you anticipate or expect. So the graphic language has to really match what the architect has intended and what the interior designer has intended. And we have to really play the creative card and make sure that these tools really represent the hundreds of millions of dollars that have been spent to develop these areas and these places. If you have structures like buildings, you're traveling through vertically. But then when you have villa complexes that are 820,000 square meters, you must be able to get in and out comfortably. That's something that gets tricky once you have boxes that are repeated over and over and over and over again in zones that are multiplied 3, 4, 10, 20 times. So it must be really confusing. So we take a page out of Transport's book and make sure that we get you out as fast as possible by giving you the tools that can get you out as fast as possible. We section out the environment, the way that we do the signage system, in a way where if you want to exit, if you want facilities, and if you want to get to where you want to go, to your house, to your zone, to your ranch, to your district, we have to make sure that you get there. And we have to make sure that it embeds an image in your mind where you can actually navigate through by using tools like colors, like lights and textures to differentiate certain areas from one another. As I see the yellow sign, again, I'm exiting. I'm leaving the environment that I came to. If I'm seeing the white sign, I know I'm getting to a facility, whether it was a school, a mosque, a hospital, a clinic. That differentiation is very important when you're working on such massive scale with many zones in an environment. Once you do that, you have to also ensure that people see those signs, that the contrast is correct, that the color is correct, that the size of the sign corresponds to the environment that it's in. Sometimes you have to build environments that are humongous, and sometimes you have to build environments that are small and cozy. And still, you must make sure that people can see the sign from whatever distance they're going to make and take the decision. Once you do that, you have to also make sure that the language of the signage system is clear and builds a brand of the environment that you're in. It's a welcoming aspect. It's the thing that welcomes you. It's the thing that guides you. It's the thing that gets you where you want to go. So you must make sure it is easy and comfortable and legible and also welcoming and keeps you comfortable. Something that I've noticed in airports when I arrive in new countries, signage is either makes me feel happy and cozy and comfortable or makes me feel cold and distant. And that's something we definitely think about when we're designing signage and wayfinding systems for the environments that we think about. Then when we get out of the house to go to the office, we have, again, a place where we can plan offices the way we want. When architects are sitting planning offices, they think about retail space because when you work, you want to eat, you want to get things done before you get home. So they build structures where you have office spaces and retail spaces. And then once you have offices and retail, why not add some residential aspect to all of this? So if you want to live next to where you work and then have a retail aspect to all of that, and then place a mosque within the development. So you have massive developments that are rethought in a way where it can cater to an individual without perhaps ever leaving the environment, unless you want to go out and have a good time. That's where kind of we try to simulate these environments. They're not built. You have so many different layers that you need to navigate through. So we take the content that the architects give us, and we take the client through a journey, a visual journey. We sometimes have the content to do something like that, where we take you through the environment and really show you the different layers that you can go through and give you a simulated, a specific journey where you get from A to Z, seeing the signage system before ever laying a stone or digging a hole or starting the environment. From here, what we try to do is then create a visual language for the signage system. Make sure that the signage system fits the environment that you've designed, that you've spent money making sure that it will be sold to the investors and be used by those people who intend to make it in the environment that it is. From there, you want to go out. And in the desert, you have a lot of desert. So you start to get really creative. We have an outdoor zoo that is 50 kilometers, as big as the city itself, with man-made lakes, trees, and birds that can't leave because they gotta eat. So they feed them and they just stay. So once you do that, they came to me and asked me, Zach, we need signage. So how do you wayfind literally in 50 kilometers? How do you create a signage system in a desert? You have road networks that get you to these lakes. You have different animals that are in these lakes. And then you have different platforms to view these animals in these lakes. And one of the main tools me and you kind of came to uh, uh, came to put together is that how people navigate usually in the desert, the sea, is by using the star system. We look up to move. So why don't we bring what is up, down, and create a coordinate system that then you can navigate through. It is about exploration when you're in these lakes, and it is about seeing all these different environments and understanding how you can explore. So by giving you a coordinate system that doesn't rely on Google Maps, because you can't send a pin in a desert, it just doesn't work. Nobody will get to you. You must be able to see, to navigate, to use your eyes, because that's something that doesn't require a battery. And make sure that you can get to these environments and discover and be able to explore and see all these different animals that can escape. So we create different sign systems that make sure that you can navigate these deserts by just looking up, seeing the closest pillar to you, and then following the numbering system to get out of that environment, or following the numbering system to get deeper within the environment. Once you do get deeper into the environment, you're comfortably able to navigate those environments and be able to explore more, and then stop in a shaded environment, in a shaded kiosk, and look at the maps and discover more areas. Once you do that, that's the desert. We're lucky enough to have the sea. And once you go to the sea or to the beach, you need a different type of signage system. You need a design system that is different than the systems that you have in malls or theaters or offices or residences. And you're designing something for the beach, so you must use reclaimed materials. You must use things that would not affect the environment that you're designing for. So in La Mer, one of the nicest developments in Dubai, what we try to do is first simulate a journey to show you how you can get from A to Z. Divide the environment to north and south and central, so you're never lost. Because again, it is 300,000 square meters. So you must know where you're going. Once we design these environments, we look at what the language could be. And we start to formulate these signage systems and make sure that they work within that environment and they literally enhance your experience rather than just direct you to where you want to go. Enhancing the experiences requires creativity, requires you knowing your visual identity, that what the developer is aiming to do and how they're aiming to develop that environment and what kind of feeling they want you to have. It is not just about getting you where you want to go, it's about getting you where you want to go with a smile on your face. So once we build these environments, we try to showcase how they are built. We start from parking lots that are enough for 500, 1,000 cars at times. And then when you're in that car park, it's dark and grim. So we decorate it. We bring the upstairs downstairs and show you how the environments can be enhanced really well. Then when you get out of the parking lot, what you see is what puts a smile on your face. So it must be decorated, it must be designed really well, and it must still be functional. It must have a good contrast, it must be the correct message, it must really get you where you want to go, but with a smile on your face. So once you do that, and it gets hot, you have to then get out of the heat and get into a mall or a theater. And in Yas Mall, for example, where you have 65 F&Bs and 300 plus stores and 2,000 car park spots, you have to really think about the environment and really understand how you're going to section that environment out. Where are you going to lead people to, and what side of the environment do they want to be in? If it's fashion, if it's a cinema, if it's the hypermarket that you want to buy your groceries at, it must be really well planned. If there's a metro link to that mall, you must really direct people well to these environments. Understanding a plan, understanding a map in these environments can get really complex because often things change within the mall. Places change, so maps must change all of the time. Digital maps work well, but still there's a lot of input to be done in these cases. So The signage system also needs to be adaptable enough. You have to understand what you want to put on a signage system that you're building, fabricating, and then placing, and very difficult to change after that. So you must really understand the strategy, talk to your client, understand what they want to do and how they want to do things. Once you understand those layers, you then formulate a system that works well for that environment and that doesn't need to change. Directing you from different parts of the mall to the links to like Ferrari World in this case, and then bringing you back to where you parked your car initially after you've had a day full of experiences. You must really memorize these steps that you took during the day so you're not frustrated for hours in the evening when you're going back with your kids and leaving the environment. So visual cues that help you memorize, information that helps you retain where you came from and where you need to go next is what we have to think about all of the time as you navigate through these environments. From here, we go into smaller environments that have to apply the same logic and the same thinking. And it's again about how you take the interior and the decorative elements of these environments and build further into the developments. What we also do is ensure that you get to where you want to go throughout that experience and ensure that you are comfortable throughout that process. Once you're out of the mall and in a theater, for example, that's 3,000 seats, that is modular. A theater that can become 3 theaters or 2 theaters or 1. So how does a signage system then adapt to ensure that you get where you want to go? We have to always innovate in the way that we think to make sure that the signage system is really adapts to that environment. So what we came up with in this theater that is modular, a modular system. A digital sign that does not look digital. What happens usually from when we looked at people and when we looked at our users and we looked at the anxieties that users have, they often don't trust digital systems in an environment where they see signage systems. If you're looking for a sign, you don't want to trust digital information because sometimes it can vary, it can change, it can mislead you, or you might not trust yourself using that information. So what we try to do is try to create a system that looks like it's static, but in fact is digital. We used two-way mirrors to simulate a directional sign that then can change. If you have two events happening at the theater simultaneously, the sign will change to direct you to do different events. If you have one event happening and the theater is open, then the 3,000 seats are available, then you're directed to one event. If you have 3 theaters, the same thing applies. So we have to often adapt to the environment that we're working in. We have to often make sure that it makes sense to the user at the end of the day, that they have no issues navigating these environments and going to the places they intend to go. When we design hospitals, we have to also look at the experiences of people. In this hospital, we have 7,000 rooms. It is just for kids. It's called the Kuwait Children's Hospital. And in that specific environment, because it's so vast, we have to really give you visual cues from where you enter. Really keep it familiar for children, so it is not just function. You have to actually think about the user, about the child who's coming in for treatment, and give them something that makes sense within that environment, something that really adapts. So what we tried to do here, we created different sea creatures. That was the theme that the interior designer has come up with. And once we did that, we started to create different graphic language that then fits within that environment. So as you enter, you see that visual cue, and then it keeps going in all of the signs, on all of the walls, as you venture through that environment. So when you leave that section of the hospital, it is very clear to you where you are and where you ventured to. So by distinctly identifying, giving each part of the building a distinct visual identity, we ensure that you are able to navigate that environment even though it is extremely complex. The way they build the reason they build hospitals at that massive scale is because all the professionals and all the machinery and all the tools that the doctors would use would be in one place. So it is actually a good thing to build large environments, but it's difficult then to navigate them. So we have to ensure that people can navigate these environments, are able to navigate these environments easily and simply. And at the same time, create a map system that aids them as they move through that environment, helps them understand how the environment is sectioned out, what places are available to you, and what places you can actually venture to. We always, this is a bit of low quality, but in general, this is kind of how we also take you through that environment, because this hospital will be built in 5 years. So I have to make sure that you understand the process. You understand how people are navigating through. You understand how the signage really helps you identify and, uh, and create an identity for all these different locations, all these different spaces. From here, we also developed the system where we have to make sure in hospitals that signage is easily cleaned. It is a different experience than when you're in a mall, where everything has to be uh, antimicrobial, and it has to be cleaned really well, and it has to be cleaned often. So we have to make sure the material we use doesn't fade away. The information on this material does not go away. We have to make sure that the signage can stand the test of time with rigorous cleaning over and over again. So each environment really gives you a different challenge. Then we get to the Louvre in Abu Dhabi. And that's one of my favorite projects so far. Because even when you build environments and you spend a lot of money building those environments, and you bring the best of the best in the world to make sure these environments are amazing, you still can sometimes make mistakes in signage. It is about architecture first. If architecture is complicated and architecture is layered, signage can actually solve some of the problems. When the architecture is clear and straightforward, signage does little work. But when the environments get layered and complex, and then the signage is set in a way where it doesn't really guide you where you want to be or where you want to go, it can become problematic. And that's where experts have to come in to reanalyze the environment, understand the type of user who is getting confused, and the reason why they're not finding their way. So in built environments, we have to look at things completely differently. We have to really understand what type of user is using that environment. And then we have to understand what tools they need to navigate these environments. And once we do that, we have to convince the client that that's the need of the user and that's the tool you need for that environment. When you have a client like this, it gets very tricky. So you have to really go through all of the layers, showcase all of the things, show them the signages that they have, that they built, don't function and why, and reason with them to make sure that they understand why these things are failing. Because replacing a sign with another sign can be a tricky exercise to convince someone with. So we take the environment and we venture through it. We analyze each part. We look at each section. And we ensure that our clients, that from the user's perspective, this is where it fails, or this is where it does not deliver on what it needs to deliver at. Once you do that, you have to actually venture people through the entire system. So in the Louvre Abu Dhabi, as you arrive and as you venture through the environment, you see all these places that you need direction and need guidance and don't have. So we have to really come in and simulate, test the environment, showcase different systems, test things out, put things on walls, and really assess our solutions one by one. Make sure that people are using these solutions and the success rate of all of these solutions as we implement them. Once you do implement the solution and you monitor how people are moving through that environment and monitor how people are using the environment, you then have to make a decision on how aesthetically you want to address the issue versus functionally how you can address the issue. In an environment like the Louvre Abu Dhabi, where everything is pristine and clean and neat and designed really well, adding a functional tool can sometimes take away from the environment rather than add to it. So we have to be very particular about the way that we do things and the way that we add those tools, the way that we design those tools. They always often have to have a we have to make sure that there's a point of everything that we do, and that the point is based on what's been done before in similar projects and how those things actually function in that environment. Once we do that, we have to show to our clients how these things have elevated the environment, how they affected the environment, how they enhanced the environment, and and show them whatever is already there, whatever has been placed, where the mistakes occur, and how failures happen, so we can avoid them this time around. So in general, that the point of this part of the presentation is to show that even when you actually work really hard to navigate people through environments, it can actually become tricky. And you must make sure that you're really focusing on the user and their perspective before you start to build a signage and wayfinding system. And once you have a signage and wayfinding system, it is not enough for the user to understand the environment. So a mapping system really helps you explore, really helps you understand where you are. And a signage system then comes in to help you navigate these environments, take decisions where decision points are. And a map really guides you to all the other aspects of the environment. And basically, what we did eventually with the Louvre, we're still actually in debates at this point, but what we're trying to do now is make sure that the tools that we would use are still the same tools that they have used, but just optimized to make sure that people see them, that they're in the correct line of sight, that they're in the right contrast, that they're in the right environment, and simulate these journeys with people until we have a good success rate of people navigating the environment without, asking for assistance. That's pretty much it for me. Thank you.
So I'm going to start off these questions again.
Sure.
A lot, most, if not all, of the wayfinding concepts that you mentioned can be applied to transit wayfinding. And we saw a little bit of wayfinding with Hannah's presentation from the TFL yesterday. But what would be your top or your first piece of advice that you would give to a transit agency that wants to take another look at their wayfinding and see how they can improve it?
Hierarchy. It is all about how you give people information. One thing, when me and you went to the metro in Dubai, he pointed out something that, well, I don't use the metro as much because we drive, but in general, once we walked into the station, you can't really navigate through because all the information has one tone. All the colors are similar. So by designing a hierarchical system with the correct type of information and way of disseminating that information to the user is what signage is all about. I don't give you all the destinations in any project that I develop. I give you parts of the information that will get you to the next point, and then the next point after that, to make sure that you get where you want to go. Otherwise, you'll be overwhelmed with the amount of information that you're given and not get where you want to go. And in transit, for me, personally, it is always an anxiety to get to the right platform, to make sure I'm making the right decision. I don't have that luxury of exiting in the wrong place because I don't know where I am in general in transit when I'm traveling. So in Germany, like you were mentioning earlier about getting on the wrong side of the, I don't like that. I want to make the right decision. I will take my time. I will take more time to make sure I'm exiting in the correct place because I'm a wayfinder too. So it hurts me personally if I'm doing making those types of mistakes. So it is hierarchy mainly. It is making sure that when you look up, you find the piece of information that you're looking for. Always at the decision point, and move on. That is what I think is the most valuable. That's how signage becomes the most valuable thing when you're moving around in an airport or in in the metro or in rail. It is what you need definitely.
Have you approached the transit agency and said we want to redo your stuff? Yeah.
Yeah.
And what they say?
No.
Any other questions for Zach?
Thank you, Zach. That was a very clearly delivered presentation. My question is about information maintenance. At T Carter, we build mapping databases for pedestrian wayfinding. And I think we've just about got the knack now of convincing our clients that a database-driven approach is the way to go. But we haven't been so successful in convincing them that they need a database for signage, for non-map wayfinding. I noticed that in your presentation you had lots of examples of signs, finger posts, etc. So my question is, how do you maintain that information? Is that in a database environment? And is the responsibility for maintenance with design technique, or is it passed back to the client or another approach?
Thank you. We we have to. There are two. I think there are many points that you made that are valid, and there are different kind of questions when you're looking from signage and wayfinding's perspective. Maintaining information and maintaining signs, because when you maintain information or change information, you have to change the sign. It is not a digital. It's not digital information. It is actually physical information out there in the world. So we have to think about that while designing signage and wayfinding. We have to make sure that if there is a need to adapt, if developments grow, Yas Acres, the one I was showing earlier, has about 4,000 villas, and that's phase one. So the signage system has to tie itself to the rest of these developments once they're developed, to the Central Park that's coming up in a couple of years. So it is very important to get the brief correctly from the client of what will happen and how things will evolve so you can build the functionality into the system where you have to change parts but not the entire system, so it is less expensive as you develop that. Now, maintaining a database for the information, every single client has different sets of requirements, but what we do is we have strategies that are carried through from one place to the other. So the hierarchy of information, the way we divide the information, the way that the information is disseminated, that's a strategy that we've come up with and designed. So we have to use, we always use those strategies to make sure that no mistakes or no issues arise in the next development. So we have that information. It's our information. We design it. We make sure that we make tools and strategies that are really function really well. And then those strategies we apply. That's kind of the trade secret that you develop, and you have to, when you analyze, when you research, when you develop, you keep that information to make sure that you guide people well in the next development, in the next phase. But in general, we don't need databases for information, and sometimes even like the road transport authority would come to us to take what we've designed to add street names to their maps or add the way that we've designed the environment to their information. So we do keep that. We have to maintain that to a certain extent. Yes. Yes.
Anyone else? Oh.
In the case of the theater, where you have signage that changes from one case to the next, has it been built already? First question. And
No.
So you don't really have feedback on the way it's used, especially on frequent users who could come back and find a different way that they've seen the previous time?
It's not built yet, and once we designed that strategy, we had to kind of show the client what it will look like. So we actually built a prototype of the sign and showed how it functions. But no, from my perspective and the way that when we developed that project, you don't often, unless you use the project often, you will not really remember what information you were given the first time versus the second time. And there's static information, digital information. So the entrance is still, let's say, A. Whether you come in today or tomorrow, it's still A. But then the way you're pointed out to the event name, that's what adapts in the sign. So it is really about, okay, I'm attending this conference today, and that's what I see on the sign, and that's what I will follow. It is less about, the environment itself, or the rooms, or the toilets, or, that does not change. Or the only thing that really changes is the event that you're getting to. So that part of the sign is what changes and what moves and what is different, really.
And do you think this kind of system could work for transportation, where it's an environment that people use mostly every day or every week or every month?
Again, it's about the need. So if you need it to adapt, then yes, definitely. I mean, that was something that we've come up with because the theater is modular, and because things are changing often. Maybe even in the day, it will change 2 or 3 times. The walls will drop, and then it will become 2 or 3, and then the afternoon, the walls will go up, and then it will become a 2,800 seat theater again for that event at night. So it is because of that adaptability and the speed that we need to adapt in. That's why we devised that system. But I mean, I can't imagine what it would be in transport that might be the need. But I mean, it would be cool to just have information that changes and adapts to where you're going. So as you go, you see the information that you need, and again, it's all about giving you that information as making you comfortable, making it easier for you as the user to navigate through the environment. Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh.
Just carrying on what she was asking, just curious. It happened to me a few times that I was asked to think about uh, signage as per your theater, and they were down to transport. And we went through the process of thinking about it, and then what the missing link was having actually lifetime information and someone full time on the job of actually looking after all the signage and so on. And I just wondering, as you were developing that project and it was kind of limited in space, meaning that you're physically right there and you might have, one person dealing with it all the time. Did you actually had that type of conversation thinking about who would be that person being in charge all the time and how many of them and what is
Is a good question. So basically, because it's a theater, in that specific example, they have an operator for the theater. And the operator for the theater designs the events, designs the environment, and designs the process that you have to go through to get people to, attend, market. So they have so many layers that are just dedicated to operating the environment. So that was not because again, at the end of the day, it's about the software. So once we build a prototype and we have the software, so how do you design the information? How do you give the information away? And how you give people that piece of information as they need it? And that was basically something that they took on board and said, as long as it's easy to adapt the system, I will make sure to adapt it because I'm there doing the job anyway. So because we have that functionality already, because the operator is already there, it made it easier for us to sell that concept to the client and get it done and functioning well. So really, we were lucky in that case. But you're right. I mean, you have to have somebody there who makes sure that the information is given correctly. If the name of the event is wrong, or you put an older event, or you put a destination that's wrong, it's a problem. And signage needs to get you there correctly. So,
Yeah, I always wonder if it's visible for a bigger system than a physical space that has wall around. Still thinking about
I
it.
mean, it would be cool. Still, it would be cool. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it. Yep.
Neighbor.
No.
Thanks for interesting presentation. And as a designer, I'm quite interested in understanding different types of users. And the hospital case, you explained that it's important to be easy to understand, even by the kids' perspectives. And also, I have experience for designing the kids' product, and to really understand their mind
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
cannot say exactly what they
True.
want. So, is there any other your know-how for understanding users who is hard to understand?
I mean, see, that's always kind of the thing that th- we have to address this issue on every project, because the user of the theater is different than the user of the hospital, is different than the residents, and then in the residential complexes you have users that are also different. You have delivery guys that don't necessarily speak Arabic or English really well. They need pictograms. They need visual language, colors to get them where they want to go. If they see yellow, they know it's exit. They will exit. It is always the user is at the center of it. And yes, I mean, it is difficult. It is often difficult. We spoke to kids. We went to children hospitals and showed different tools, visual tools, that help them also understand how signage is functioning. Um, we've designed another hospital in Saudi called Tertiary, and that's a cancer hospital for kids. And the system was built on Legos, and the Legos were the same color. So we actually tested it with kids, and they often remembered what Legos they saw along the way when their parents didn't. So the kids were better navigators in these environments than the parents. So it is always making sure you look at the elements and provide the user with more elements so they can make more decisions and help guide you making those decisions. I often find it the easiest way to kind of get more feedback or good feedback or the correct type of feedback that will help me eventually get where I want to go, or build the correct system, or build the right tools to navigate people in that environment. So it is about us really thinking about it, really understanding what type of tools we can provide, what the limitations are in fabrication, how do we make these tools if we were approved, like the digital screens within that environment, or the type of signs that we created for the hospital in that case, or the monumental things that we've designed and hung from ceilings to aid you as you go along the environment. We start the process and then try to get feedback from the user on it, and then develop it further and further as we go along. So it starts with you, me in this case, and then ends with the user, and then ferments into something that becomes usable and a system eventually.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Let's have lunch.
Yes, lunch.
It's okay. I
All
got
right,
you.
So lunchtime, back at 2:30 sharp, 14h30. We'll continue with our last 3 sessions of the symposium. Thank you.